Debbie, are we ready in the back? But I got an email from Justin Lowe that said that bill is not moving out of committee. Did you see that one?
No, I was too busy on the phone with somebody from Detroit complaining about John Henry.
Oh, gotcha.
That's where I was.
Good for you.
And she reminded me that she's a voter.
Okay, well, there you go. So Justin said that there is a little like ruffle up. Well, it's okay. This is about the transient lodging tax.
Oh, it's true.
It's the state transient lodging tax bill, and the understanding is there's a bit of a kerfuffle in the Senate Revenue Committee, and the chair is not willing to move it out of committee. So there is always a chance that anything can happen in the next couple of days, but as of now, per our AOC lobbyist, it is stuck in that committee and will not move forward. So, which is unfortunate. So Debbie, let me know. You ready? Okay, we will go ahead and open this board briefing at 2:01 p.m. We are going to immediately recess this meeting to go into executive session. And Rachel, will you be giving us the reference on that? Or
Under ORS 192660 sub 2 sub D to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations.
okay, perfect. So I will go ahead and recess this board briefing at 2:02. Yeah, so that's unfortunate.
It is horrible.
Well, and it's unfortunate because I would guess.
It doesn't sound
Yeah. Okay, so we're waiting for Sarah. Is she joining in person?
over here.
Okay. So, commissioners, that is the next item on our list. Do we have any commissioner concerns or things to discuss before that can fill this space, or shall we recess for 5 minutes? Because we did tell Sarah it was going to be 3.
Yeah, let's recess.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take a brief recess, and as soon as we'll plan to come back at 3. Okay, in case she's out there, she may have gotten caught by somebody.
Weird day. It's just feeling like a chalky
We're ready?
day or something.
Okay, wonderful. We will reopen this board briefing at 3 o'clock on my watch, 3 o'clock p.m. So we're happy to have Sarah Absher, Director of Community Development, Chris Kiola, whose title I won't get correct. I know that you are sanitation.
Environmental program manager.
There you go, Environmental Program Manager, and Chris Corliss, our new Assistant Building Official with us. So thank you all for being here. Sarah, I'm going to hand it to you. I know we are talking about community development fee updates.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, and I am so excited to have a full leadership team here to have this conversation with all of us together. Okay, so part of our plan has been incremental fee increases. I gave you some draft fee increase proposals as part of the budget submittals in March and April. This is something we've been talking about, leadership team meetings, budget committee meetings, the Tiberius report. Everything is talked about keeping our fees online.
Your microphone's on.
Yes.
Okay.
To sustain services. We have gone through these carefully. And in fact, I've continued to adjust the planning fees. What I will say is that the planning fees are the only department fees, let's see, besides short-term rentals. Short-term rentals and planning are the only licensing and permitting fees that do not require review by the state of Oregon before we bring them to you. So in my email, I've outlined to you for building codes division compliance with the state building codes. They actually have a statutory public notification process that we have to follow, along with Oregon DEQ, because these two divisions, our permitting fees are part of those overall state umbrella programs. So we have complete discretion of what to do with planning, how we want to notice it, what we want to do. The reason why I bring that up is because we have done the work with those state entities for building and sanitation already. So those boxes have been checked. All of our fee schedules come under our state permitting program, right? So all of our permits and licensing programs follow our permit tracking or ACELA program. It's a program that jurisdictions across the state of Oregon use for permitting and licensing. We have done the back end work to get ready for today, should the board want to move forward with an order to adjust fees. All of the back end work has been done. Our goal was to try to meet that July 1st date to go with the fiscal year. There's not mandatory for everybody. You guys could decide you don't want to increase fees. But in preparation, knowing what the expectation has been moving forward to sustain our services, all of the back end work has been done. It's just a matter of what would you like to do? And when do we, flip the switch? And how do we flip it? So what you have are all of those fee increases with that summary of how we would like to move forward. Anticipation would be if you're comfortable with this or whatever changes August 1st. So I've already reached out to the Building Codes Division, who's responsible for Acela, to say we're meeting today, we're moving forward. It'll be a date in the future because obviously July 1st is not going to be where we're going to land. So with the building permit fee schedule updates, what you have is that standard 3% increase with some highlighted pieces that Julie in our office and I actually had to work with the Building Codes Division on, because there were a few things they said we either needed to add a fee for, like we had the service but we didn't have a specific fee. They said you have to change the language and add the fee, or you need to just add the service with the fee. So those are all of the highlighted things in the building permit fee schedule. There are two exceptions to those highlighted areas, and those are the special inspection and consultation that's on the first page, and then the investigation fee, which I believe is on page 2.
So this is the one titled Tillamook County Fee Schedule.
Yep, Tillamook County fee, so it starts with A, structural permitting fees. So the reason why those two fees have been added, those are our fees to collect and charge appropriately for our time when we are looking at enforcement or compliance issues. Years ago, the state said you charge double permit fees, and that's how you recovered the cost to go back in when it takes multiple staff to meet, do site visits, talk about enforcement, bring people into compliance. Typically, you're looking at, with each compliance or enforcement issue, at least 4 staff. You're looking at paperwork, tracking, documentation, meeting with the people you're trying to help get into compliance. To give you an example, there
So
is.
right now, are you talking about investigation?
Yes, the investigation and the consultation. It depends on what it is. If it's just the consultation and we don't have to do an investigation, meaning going to the site, then we would just do the consultation fee, because not all things require an investigation. But again, it's that team having to come together to sit down. What is it? How do we fix it? Meet with the people. Sometimes we have to go to the site, which is the investigation, because we actually have to see what they've done. Like if they built something without permits, we got to go assess, or they've converted an area of a structure to something else without permits. We have to go see what they've done to figure out how we help them get into compliance. One of the most recent examples of this that took several days and probably 8 hours of just investigation and consultation time. We had a business that expanded. All of the wiring and mechanical work for this business, which this is a manufacturing business, didn't get any permits. It was meeting with the subcontractors first to ask them what they did, because obviously the people who own the property, they don't know. So it was, what did you do? Doing the walkthrough, figuring out the permitting, is a plan review required? And it was a momentous amount of work. We got it done, and we got it done with them. But if we would not have charged for that time, and there were 4 or 5 of us involved in that's a lot of our time and cost that went into that. And the outcome was successful. It's all done. It's all been permitted. Everything is in compliance. But that's why those fees are so important to us, in our opinion, is because we have to be able to have a way to recoup our cost for these types of situations.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Is
and we
there,
need
is
to
that,
recoup
is, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Is there any special fee that's associated with people failing to get the permits they're supposed to get and you have to do it after the fact?
No, that's gone. That's where these fees come in, whether it's a consultation or the investigation fee. And sometimes it's both. It depends on, the circumstances. But what I would say is that that decision depends on the situation, depends on what we feel is the best course of action, and oftentimes requires legal counsel engagement because we have to talk to them too about those enforcement and if there's any litigation or liability issues. So we use it very carefully. It's not a weapon. We don't wield that as a punishment, but really what that gets down to is what is appropriate to cover our time to do all of that work.
What's the fee for the thing that I did?
Your consultation?
Yes. Well, we're
I
starting-
knew you were gonna ask me that. I
No,
did
you should have started with that one.
not. So that's for planning only, and actually these fees start
Okay,
wrapping.
so I'm
all
jumping
that-
ahead.
You're jumping.
Yeah, you're jumping ahead.
Late for planning goal?
But punchline on that is I did not change that.
You did not?
I did not change it. It's still the
Same
same.
as it's been.
That's probably a good thing, Sarah.
Yeah. Now I got some good news on planning stuff. So anyway, but I mean, like hydroponic pool infrastructure review for electrical or plumbing, like there were some weird things in our building permit fee process we didn't have fees for. And as you know, we've seen some very unique projects.
Sure.
And so, to Julie's credit, really working with the building codes division on that stuff, and then her and I talking about what are other jurisdictions charging, what is appropriate for us. Our goal is to always stay in the middle of permit fees. We're not the cheapest place to get permits, but we're definitely not the most expensive. I mean, we're trying to figure out what is reasonable.
Okay. So generally, everything is just up 3%.
Yeah,
Other than
except
the
for those
highlighted.
highlighted. Yeah.
Okay.
How much percentage-wise are we from the lowest and from the highest? What's the percentage difference if you had to guess?
Oh, gosh. I would say, so from a percentage, like Deschutes County and other counties, our fees are probably 50 to 75% of what they charge. And before we did this, we did a massive update 2 years ago. We had some of the lowest permitting fees in the entire state across the board.
And then, does everybody, if most counties look like this, have this many, this is pretty much state
Yep. And,
regulated? Okay.
yep. And this framework comes off of the Building Codes Division
Okay.
fee program framework. And, when I had to upload all of this and submit it to the state early and provide a letter, why are we increasing fees? There are so many jurisdictions this year. I've never seen the list of jurisdictions as long as it is. And the two things are cost recovery in terms of like vehicles, gas, maintenance, and just operation. And the second is salaries. Because as you know, everybody's trying to like level out and rate salaries, and with benefits, like that's outpacing what we're all charging for our services.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure.
And there were some pretty dramatic jumps in some of those jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So it felt good to be like 3%
Mhm.
and a few other things,
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, that said, can I talk about, I've gotten a couple of inquiries lately about fees that people wanted to contest. And so is this a good time to talk about that?
We can, or we can wrap this
It's-
up and come back to that.
Up to you. It's about building. though.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, so it was recently the Oceanside and Cape Mears emergency preparedness groups
Mhm.
put in their emergency cash systems because I'm sure you know about this,
I
right?
know all about
So-
these, yes.
So representatives from both of those organizations reached out to me independent of one another and said, Sarah did a great job. There were a lot of compliments involved. In fact, there were public compliments involved for you. Sarah did a great job. We got this done. It was amazing. It was a miracle that we were able to pull this off in 2 months, etc. If you don't know about it, they put in emergency cash like containers that had to be wired, and they were on concrete platforms, and they got a big grant from the state so that they can have emergency supplies, including comms, and it's a really cool program for disasters. So it's really cool. But both of those groups said to me, Commissioner Bell, would it be possible for in the future, when you're doing this, to not charge nonprofit volunteer groups for the permitting fee? Because that cost us $1,000 and it came out of our pockets.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, that's something we haven't talked about. So I'd like us to talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Thank you. Under the building program for building permit fees specifically, we cannot waive the fees. If someone wanted to do something and request support for fees, could bring that forward to the Board of Commissioners. And typically what we've done, so we had a habitat project a couple of years ago where that came up and brought that to the board. And what we ended up doing was using general fund dollars out of planning to pay the building permit fees. So if there is money available or some way, or maybe that's part of the Public Safety Initiatives Fund as we are looking at reworking that, I think we could absolutely set up a process to where they come forward, I come with them, we talk about where we can pull that money from, to cover those permitting fees moving forward. And the reason why they can't be waived is because the building program is a special revenue fund, right? And the whole purpose of that is understanding there's really busy times, there's recessions. That money in the future is so critical to help build and sustain services during downtimes, which is why, we're not supposed to waive those fees. But if we can find a different place to pull that money from, including other parts of the community development budget where it exists, happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, that would be great. It is one of those special situations where it's a public safety initiative. We totally want them to do it. It serves the greater good. It's all volunteer.
Right.
I thought, oh man, yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't ask me about waiving the fees. Unfortunately, I wish they would have, because we could have actually followed that process and come here, talked about, when we did it for Habitat, there was kind of this criteria discussion of, because we want to be careful about waiving fees and really make sure it's for those, exceptional circumstances. But what should the criteria be if we are going to waive fees or pull money from other pots to cover this good work? And so maybe that's something we could talk about at a future board briefing.
That'd be great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up. And thanks for sharing the compliments.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
Other questions about the building fee schedule?
I don't think so.
He's waiting. Okay, so let's move to sanitation.
Yeah, Chris Corliss, you got off easy.
This year.
Chris Keel, I don't know that it's gonna go so well for you. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You've been here longer. People are more likely to have a question. So, do you want to present and tell us a little bit there, and then we'll fire questions at you?
Sure. What I've done is I did one chart. I provided the existing fee schedule, and the other one that's 2025 is the proposed fee schedule. I'm not sure if it was included, but I also have Lincoln County and Clatsop County printed out. And what I like to do, and DEQ, we always have to run our fees by DEQ. And the rule says that we can only charge what it costs us to do the program. And I'm always looking at what DEQ charges, what other counties charge. We are right in the middle between Lincoln County and Clatsop County as far as our fees go, which it's kind of nice to stay there. The fees across the state are all over the board. So I pulled two that are close to us. On average, if we do a 3% hike on all of our fees, the highest fee, which we don't do very many of per year, I think was about a $50 increase. On average, they're about $15 to $20 increase per permit. So that's what that 3% boils down to per permit, is the public will be paying about 15 to 20 bucks more per permit. And it was just a straight 3% across the board. I didn't add any more fees. Pretty simple bump. Any questions?
Commissioners?
No.
I think 3% is, I think it's a good systematic approach.
In
When
the last
was the last time we increased them?
2023, early 2023, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't do it every year.
that'll be something we talk about in the Tiberius work, whether or not we do it every year. But at this point, we're a 2-year gap on yours.
Well, what I would say is if that's the direction the board wants to go to with a board order, and because we have this back-end program where our fees are all stored through the state, instead of coming forward every year, if you wanted that 3% incremental increase, that's a matter of staff doing the work with the state and just getting that lined up to our July 1st every year or January 1st or whatever it is. We just make sure those are ready to go and into effect. So, I mean, so that we don't also have to do this back and forth every year.
No, I think
where
that's a
we're
good
headed.
point, and I think
Yeah.
that's part of the work we'll be talking about
Yeah.
with the Tiberius report is, are there any things that we're gonna put into automatic?
Yeah.
But appreciate you bringing everything forward and letting us have a chance to look at it and think about it.
Chris Corliss, since you've just come to us presumably from someplace else, did the fees go up 3% annually wherever you came from?
When I came from, I worked for a third-party company that provided inspection service for multiple jurisdictions, but when I worked in Lincoln City, we had a larger fee increase originally, because like Tillamook County, they were very below the average, and then I believe they just took another 3% last year. So I believe that is pretty consistent with what building codes, a lot of people submit to building codes. So 3% is definitely reasonable. I think most members of the public are a little more acceptable to that. When you're going up 5 to 7%, it's a little bit harder to justify. That's why I think they were hoping to go to 5 days a week inspections there with that. But it all depends on what you're bringing to the table with your fee increases. So.
Thank you.
And I think probably building is more typical of going up because it is a special revenue fund. It does have to fund itself, whereas, things like planning, where we put general fund into it, it gives it this sort of different flow, because you're also special revenue, correct? No,
General.
you're general, okay.
Yeah.
You just keep bringing them up, thank you.
I got a question. Did you guys plan the colored shirt?
No,
That was the new Chris. New Chris. doesn't
nobody
have the
told the
shirt.
new Chris what the
Just sent me a
uniform.
message this morning.
Yeah.
You should have.
It's funny how that happened. Well, you guys are the same. You're all wearing blue today.
I'm sea mist and she is sea foam. So
Oh, thank you for the
a
clarification.
little different.
Nice. Appreciate that clarification.
Yes. Any other questions on sanitation fees?
I don't think so.
Okay. So moving into the planning program fee schedule.
Yes. Okay. So
With
I
the
have,
itty bitty little letters.
yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so I have some good news. With the middle housing code updates, all of our projects that have required conditional uses to go past 1 or 2 dwellings, right? So the whole point of the middle housing code updates, clear and objective process, streamline zoning, get those type 2, type 3 uncertain reviews out of the process that takes several months and thousands of dollars, right? All of that, one of the things I'm most excited about is that is going away. With that, the costs of all those extra permits for land use decisions. What I have had to do though, or what I'm proposing to do in lieu of that, if you look at the zoning permits, you will see that I have done a zoning permit for 1 or 2 units. The state looks at whether it's a duplex or a single family dwelling, they basically look at them, they're the same animal. Everything's the same, everything's permitted the same, etc. So following that, state codes for building and others, I have put our zoning permit fee the same way to reflect that. And our applications will be updated to reflect that as well. When you start getting into 3 or more units, and you're gonna see these in the codes that are gonna start coming to you at the end of July. There are different design standards. There's different pieces that start folding into 3 or more units, including cottage clusters. And if you look down that list under zoning permit with commercial, you're going to see 3 or more dwelling units. And I am proposing a $600 zoning permit fee for those, because a lot of the work that would have been part of that $1,500 or $3,000 conditional use fee or whatever, we're still gonna have to do that work. It's just not gonna be in that separate permit and in that public arena. And so that's why I have broken it out, is because it's gonna take us more time with a multifamily project rather than a 1 or 2 family dwelling zoning permit. I would like to start here, and I am hopeful that the review process for 3 or more units, whether it's 3 units or 20 units, like for an apartment, like Kingfisher, will still be the same amount of time. There's some unknowns there. I don't know that for sure because we're embarking on a whole new permitting program for housing. But this is where I would like to start. And then I think we can reevaluate it, and if we have to adjust that or adjust those numbers and add maybe a third tier of permitting review for those larger projects, then do that. But I think this is a good place to start. And then, of course, as those projects come in, track that time carefully. We have had a planner resignation. Allison is leaving our team. We are very upset about that, and very sad to see her go. So I am down to 2 planners and have talked to Commissioner Scar yesterday about contract planning services, because we have not seen a decrease in between all of the planning work at the counter, zoning permits, all of these things we're doing. And planning is a mandated service, and there are statutory timelines attached to those permits and decisions, where basically if we don't get our job done in time, people can sue the county for lack of due process is what it's called. So I talked to Commissioner Scar last night, and I am entering and bringing forward, probably in the next 2 weeks, a contract to start working with a contract planning firm to help write reports and do permits. Because Melissa and Sheila and I just cannot do it alone. I've always done planning work, but losing that person and understanding it's going to take us several months to fill that position and train, the safest thing for us to do from a risk standpoint and a customer service standpoint is to get a contract firm in to start working with right away. And so my hope is, and again, we've never done this before. This is a new thing. This is a new pivot to make sure that we are keeping up with demand and services. I don't want to propose higher increases to these review fees for those types of land use decisions and permits. What you see here is basically that 3 to 6%. There are things I've intentionally been tracking and watching just because they're all different. Right, so they all depend, like the complexities are different, the work can be different, legal engagement and legal counsel is different. And sometimes with Mr. Kearns or others, there's external costs that go with that, or Nikki with GIS. So those are the things with these fee increases that have been in my mind in terms of to keep this going. I think our fees, whether it's Melissa and I doing the work or the consulting team, actually met with the firm yesterday to really talk about a structured process of what they would do for us and what we will continue to do to minimize those external costs. But I think these fees will work, and my hope is that this contract will not have to be in place for long. But to train a new planner, it's a 2 to 3 year process.
Right.
It's a huge investment, so.
Where's Allison going?
She's going to the creamery. She is completely departing from planning, and she is so talented and has so much potential. But even if you're good at something, if you don't love it, makes a difference.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's headed to the creamery. Yeah, we're all very sad to see her go.
Okay.
Yeah. But so happy to answer any questions. Commissioner Fournier, I did not adjust your consultation fee. Probably one of the biggest jumps are the floodplain development permits. With that biologist letter, what we are already finding out is that requires more work on our end. The hold harmless agreements, even with the litigation, with the pickums and the biological opinion, with our four-door approach, that's still extra work that has come to us. And so that increase is what you see for that. Because those floodway permits means that they are an area where water comes, right? Floodplain, the water may come, but it's not that no rise. It's not that speculation where we've really got to dig deep into that ESA compliance piece. So that's why there's a big jump there. And I think that's the biggest one.
And what's that called on here?
Floodway, let's see, that is a development permit type 2 estuary or
Oh, I see it.
floodway.
Gotcha.
So estuary means you're in the water.
Yep.
Floodway means you're really close to the water and the water rises to you. That's all of your
And it's-
pilings and piers.
Yeah, they went up $200.
Yep, yep. So that is more than a 3% increase.
Okay, I should know this and I don't, but, so, different departments, you guys have, obviously some general fund, some special fund. Where does this increase, where does this money land?
This is general fund.
Okay, and do you know what the number is? I meant to email you earlier today, but to see what for the total, I know it's 3% increase, that's easy to figure out. Do you have any idea what the number is gonna be based on last year's? If you think it's gonna be about the
Oh,
same?
yeah, it's a good question. I have not done the projections.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
curious.
I mean, we've been tracking like how many anticipated permits we get every year, right? And I did have that. I can go through the budget presentation slides that I did and try to put some of those projections together.
Yeah, it's just a
Depends on what
ballpark.
people apply for too.
And the other question is, when you do these increases, the state, they're set, right? They're not getting a piece of the 3% pie.
They are not. In fact, so DEQ and Building Codes Division, if you look at those two fee schedules for sanitation and building, there's a surcharge, a percentage for surcharge that we charge the customer on their permit, and then we cut those checks to those state agencies later. So we're basically a pass-through. We collect it and we send it off, but the money, our flat fees, our rates stay either in the general fund or in the building special revenue program. That's a good question. Thank you.
So what I particularly like about the building and the sanitation is that they went up by 3%, which makes it easy for us to, it's logical, it mirrors what it costs to do business, and it's easy for us to explain to our constituents when they say, oh, your fees, to be able to say it's 3%, it's the cost of doing business. In yours, in planning, some of them are a lot more than 3%. And so that, talk me through that, because when I look at this and I anticipate constituents reaching out to us and saying, what about the fees? Which happens, I'm telling you.
Sure.
It's tricky for us if we don't understand the process or can't justify it. So
Yeah.
talk us through that.
Sure. Okay, so let's do zoning permits, because that's what we do the most. That's what people see the most. That's like the emergency, the cash projects. With those, so when you think about those submittals, and I'll use the 1 and 2 dwelling units, so that has a proposed $50 increase. So that is actually just at about 6% if you did a 3-year increase last year and a 3% increase this year from when we had upped the fees in 2023. With that, what you're looking at is you're looking at multiple hours of a planner time that could result in multiple, submittal of information because they don't always submit everything the first time. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of work with the planner very intimately with the customer to make sure we have everything we need. It can require us to work with Public Works. It can require reaching out to a water or sewer district. So all of that time, when you track a planner's time for a zoning permit, plus then actually doing the work, the height, they need specific covenants, restrictions. Their house is hitting the top of the height maximum of the zone. We have kind of a hold harmless agreement that we have to go through with the customer because we don't want the liability if they build too tall, right? They gotta sign something that says if we're too tall, we're gonna fix it. You have all of that discussion and engagement just during the time that zoning permit comes in and during that review. And we have gone basically in 6-8 years, that total increase now, if you would agree to the $350, is $100. So as our salaries have gone up, as time has gone, things have become more expensive. We're looking at harder, more difficult, challenging lots. I mean, because with the cities, you have a lot of, rectangular, square-shaped lots. they're flat. You know, they don't have the complexities of a lot of the places that we are working in, and that just takes more time. And then with all of the processing and coordination with the building division, you start adding up those hours, it's a lot. And so that basically, talking to planning staff and watching them and working with them through these reviews, it's a lot of hours. You know, and yeah,
Based more on an average of what a permit is taking now as opposed to a flat increase?
that's right. And what we've tried to do is find that sweet spot in the middle. Some permits don't take as long, some do. And that's why too, if you see there's interior remodels, there's additions. You know, this fee is for those, this is vacant land, these are new projects. And those new projects do take more time, which is why they're separated out.
What was your criteria for not increasing? I know, and you may have manufactured dwelling, 311.
Yeah, because those fees are right now. Right, you know, just tracking and paying attention to what it's taking us, the time and the number of people that have to be involved, either from an administrative and a processing standpoint to the planner doing the review standpoint. What is taking us more time, right? What are we not appropriately charging for? Manufactured dwellings, I feel like we're good where we're at. You know, I mean, I could raise it 3%
That's
to
what I
raise
was- what I
it.
was wondering. I'm looking at the ones that aren't, and I'm not a, I'm not a fan of these fees.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
that. But I am questioning or wondering, and I'm not saying it's a problem, I'm just wondering if I agree with these time-intensive things,
Yeah.
charging for that. But I'm just curious on why, and it may be that they fall within, the comparators that you're using.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I mean, it's just been my approach to this has just been trying to be really careful and think about what are we doing that is taking us more time than we're charging? And what are we doing where our fees are right? You know, like I did all the Highway 6 cell towers.
how long since that's been increased? Because we are
2 years.
What we are trying to do with the 3% is we want to prevent that falling behind.
Yep.
Because everything, the electricity, the rent, your rent, the TLC, but everything goes up.
Totally.
So that's what we're trying to do is get ahead of it. And I think in my opinion, if we're going to do an increase, it should be across the board increase. And then additionally, the special, I guess that's my question, right? Because I don't want to do, like I said, like a 5%, 2 years, we wait on it, and then we're doing a 5% next year or 7% the year after. So
Exactly.
I guess I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I guess I was expecting they would all be 3% except for the exceptions, like with
The
other
floodway.
building. The building had the highlighted ones.
Yeah.
Right. That would be ideal from my
That way it's an
perspective.
easy way to explain it to
Yeah.
people,
Yeah,
Totally.
it would be ideal from my perspective. So if,
especially if it's going in the general fund.
yeah, so if what you're saying is that you looked at every single one of these individually and you did the assessment on what it actually costs, and this is, the proposed fees are your new level set,
Yeah.
then I respect your assessment of the time, and I totally believe you. And it would be helpful if we can say, this is our new level set, and from here on out, we're going up 3%. Because the public can understand that.
Yeah. Well, and okay, so let's talk through that because that's something I've struggled with too. We could just do a flat 3% increase. I mean, in some of this stuff, it will come out in the wash, right? I mean, it's one of planning.
I think if you did the time, really did the analysis to determine some of these need to be higher.
Yeah.
To Commissioner Bell's point, it's a level set. And then I think it's something where each year the target is to go for 3% unless you have really observed something in that permit that really needs to change. I think that's what I heard.
Like the
And
floodplain.
Right.
like the floodplain, right? That's something where you're like, 3% in general, they're taking essentially the same amount of time they took last year. We're just gonna do the 3% because
Yeah.
that we think covers staff and time and materials and keeps us
Yeah.
moving forward. But this particular one, we've discovered, it's, something got added at the state level that's making this permit this amount no longer cover the cost.
Right.
We wanna go, we're gonna need to make a bigger change with this one, or a smaller change. They took this one away, like they would ever take away a land use rule. But if they did,
Yeah. Well, the thing with planning that's so hard too is when there's a ton of invisible work, and there's never been a jurisdiction, to my knowledge, that has been able to fully recoup the cost of
Right,
doing
and we
business
don't
and
either. I mean,
services.
we end up
We're never
putting,
gonna get there.
we end up, I think, $250,000 to $300,000 out
Mhm.
of the general fund that comes into
The department as a whole.
the department as a
Yeah.
whole, and there, it obviously offsets itself in some places if you look at the full budget.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the ones, you know, like with anticipation of people reacting to them.
yeah,
And part of it is what it costs people to just do their projects. And another part of it is, can we explain it?
yeah.
So code determination of TCLUO and TCLDO, et cetera, went from 300 to 600 or 1,800.
Correct. Yeah, I would love to explain that to you. So what that is when someone's asking for something special or something rare and unusual where I do not have guidance through the ordinance, and that means I have to make a decision or do a determination that is subject to appeal, that I may have to notice, that I have to engage in legal counsel. So if it's something small where I know I'm gonna have to write, like, I had to do one for Bay Ocean Spit. It was a 20-page report for me to do the analysis. It took me a long time and a lot of research. I did that one at that type 1 review, which means there's no public notice. So sometimes, like, I have some discretion if I think, okay, I think I can do this to where I'm making a decision that is not gonna set a dangerous precedent for the county and for our planning program, or we're gonna get sued over, right? I'm gonna do that as that smaller cost, because that's me, that's not anybody else, that's my time at my rate, doing my research that may involve counsel. The larger fee is when it's something that I need to bring to a public hearing that may eventually go to you. So now I've got attorneys involved, it's a lot more research, public notifications to the Headlight Herald, which I'm super thankful we have them, but we all know how much their publication costs are. It's a room rental at the port because now I have to have a hearing, right? So that's where it quickly starts escalating, and those become very expensive and can lead to a LUBA appeal, and we cannot recoup our costs at LUBA. So that is that anticipation of those big things.
But even the lower end went from 300 to 600, it doubled.
Yes, and that is because those of them that I have had to do have ended up taking more time, or they've had to be folded into a decision that was going into a hearing anyway. So it just depends on, you know, if I have to do that type of work, it's not a black and white yes or no. It's my time to do a lot of research to get there safely.
Okay.
We have other departments, I guess I'm hearing Commissioner Bell, and I am curious about that too. And I think, did we do this with the clerk's office? Are we changing, I mean, it makes, like, what you're saying makes sense, right? Like, it
Yeah.
takes you more time, but we're already paying you a salary, so if like a detective gets paid the same as an officer, even though the investigation might take 3 months, like a homicide. And we're not, it's a different, it's apples and, guacamole. But I just want to make sure, like you said, like these big jumps, can we justify that, and is it needed?
I think what we've been trying to do in community development as much as possible is have it pay for itself
Yeah.
and put as little general fund into that as possible. And part of the reason for that is in an economic downturn, we don't want to have to lay off staff and tell builders, sorry, we don't have anyone here to do your plans, that sort of thing. So we've been trying to have this be more of a self-sustaining. We haven't said you're a special revenue fund, you have to spin off and make it work, but we're within $250,000 general fund of making that happen. So I think that it's that piece where, because it's a partner to business, right?
How many of these specials like that, when you gave an example, how many of those you do a year?
Maybe one, maybe it depends on what's coming through the door, you know, and what people want and what attorneys I'm working with that are representing developers. You know, and what is important about that process is that often is the process that gets us to yes. It's risky, but when that comes into play, it's because we're trying to get to yes.
And I do know this, I wanted to make sure, because I do understand, like, I spoke to you about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And like, I appreciate that we're not jumping up on, single wide placements and manufacture, because we talked about that. Those are the people that, you know, those kind of housing are, you know, they're trying to get into a house, and it's the quickest and cheapest way to do it. And so I do appreciate that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing this, but I do want to be able to explain it.
Yeah.
And I do like to see us get on a 3%, a steady increase rather than a jump, because I just dealt with that with my water bill and NETARs and, well, you do.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, like the land use sorry.
No,
ahead,
no, I'm sorry,
please.
go ahead.
Land use verification letter went from 205 to 500,
Yep.
so more than twice, plus an hourly rate.
That is correct, because because a land use verification, like one of those determinations, could be anything. My family's owned this 50-acre tract for 100 years. Are there any lots of record within that tract? That's deed research, that's working with the surveyor's office. That $500 gets burned up quick. And that's why we added that additional rate, is because if our research and time ends up going beyond that fee, then it's having the ability for that research time to continue to collect. And those land use verifications also, like, we don't see them often. There's a reason why they exist. And when they're applied for, it's usually something that's pretty serious. But with that comes then the research and the time and the engagement of trying to figure out how to get that verification, because basically we're giving them a determination.
So how did, that makes sense, and how did it go from 205 to 500 in 2
Because-
years?
Yeah, because in looking at what we've been doing and these verifications as they've been coming in, they are taking a monumental amount of time.
So so I'm not trying to give you a
Yeah,
hard time.
no,
I'm trying
great
to tell myself how I'm going to tell this story.
Yep.
So when we set it at 205 2 years ago, was that just too low?
It was way too low, and it's always been too low, and there was never any consideration. Like, and I think part of this is just in working through the fee schedule, not understanding what's behind, like, what is the request behind this process. And so one of the things that's bothered me is just in doing these and tracking these is seeing consistently over time. I mean, it's more than 2 hours. If you look at, you know, with Planner, you know, their hourly rates, you're looking at anywhere from, if it's Sheila, it's, you know, or Melissa, it's $50 to $75 an hour. If you're looking at me, it's a lot more than that. So at $200, by the time you add all the admin and all the other fees, that's 2 hours worth of work. And it takes longer than that just to write the report. And so that's why just seeing that and watching that over time, again, these things are those special things. These aren't those day-to-day things that we do. And part of it, you know, people don't know what they are. But those are special. That is a verification of the state changed a law in this day. And I have an oceanfront property in Cape Mears. I want you to tell me legally I can build on it. Well, we got to go back. I mean, that's comp plan research. That's goal 18. You know, looking at it, where's the beach zone line? We got to talk to OPRD. I mean, that's what those are. Can I build on this lot?
That makes sense to me. And I guess going back to my previous comment, can we say, did you research all of these carefully enough to say, this is my new level set and next year it'll be 3%?
Yeah, we could do that, unless, to your point, if something like another
Oh,
buyout, you
something
know,
totally changed.
changes, then yeah.
Comes out, then that becomes
Yeah.
a highlighted one, but
And-
consider this a level set. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah.
Both of my colleagues.
I
that
do have a
think,
question.
Are we, yeah.
One of the, and, you know, like, we joke about my complaining about the consulting fee. I hated having to pay that. And what kind of bugs me about that, I'm going to ask you an honest question. Like, some of these ones that do big jumps, are they, because the reason we're doing the consulting fee, honestly, is to slow the traffic down the window because we don't have enough people. Isn't that correct? That's not part of it, because you talked to me about, it's like, we're not recovering the money.
It's a time management tool for people that do come, that's like the revolving door.
And it was a great service, by the way. They
Thank you.
provided, she provided me with a lot of information, so.
But that is at the heart, like your experience, because we need to be able to take that time to make sure people are well informed. Like the worst thing that happens is that somebody doesn't do that. They buy a piece of property, they have a vision, and they can't do it. Right? So part of that too, especially with our real estate partners who are actually using that and telling clients to do it and coming in with them, it helps make an informed decision to buy a piece of property and make sure you can do what you want to do. That's, I mean, above all else, like it is the mechanism to say, we're going to dedicate an hour, we're going to give you every map, we're going to go through any code that applies to this property for land use and zoning to make sure you don't have any surprises if you move forward. Like it's that preventative, it's that safety net.
Now everything's changed. 'Cause it was
That's
4 months ago.
$53.
Yeah, everything's different now.
Everything's different.
So I'm
Real
gonna,
housing changes.
because
Right.
it's 3:48, I think we're gonna wrap up by 4, I'm gonna try to pull us back to the center and see what I think I have heard is the question's been asked of you, Sarah. Is this a fair representation of a level set of fees based on your experience in the last 2 years since last we did this? And a set that would then allow us on a regular basis to expect a more standard increase, whatever the commissioners decide that may be. Should it be 1.5% per year or 3% per year? Whatever we ultimately decide as commissioners we want to see in an automatic. Do you feel that you had the time and space to do the work to make sure these are what you would want as a level set?
Yes, thank you.
Would you include raising the ones that haven't been raised at all, 3%?
I think that's a future decision for us as commissioners,
Okay.
right? At this point, what I think Sarah's saying in the unincreased fees is they're already correct.
They're
The amount
accurate.
of time
I
staff
feel
is
they're adequate.
spending is covered by this particular cost.
Yep.
It means that in the coming year, we wouldn't ask you to do that level of work. We would be looking for a 3% or whatever percent we decide. I don't know if it's gonna be 1.5 or 2 or 3 or 5 or, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that's the question I'm hearing for you, Sarah, is this accurate? And can we as commissioners then say, this was a year in which we asked for a deep dive to make sure that our fees were in fact covering the costs of the work that we are doing as we are seeking to make sure that we have enough money to do what we do. And yes, we did, and yes, this is it. You shouldn't expect to see these kind of jumps again in the future. You should expect to see a more gradual rise unless something changes in how a permit is required to be processed.
Yes, correct. And if you want, like, to move forward in preparation for the public meeting with an order, I could do a memo with a summary of some of these big jumps
That'd be great.
and explain what we've talked about today.
Yeah, that'd be great. Like in the other sections where you have highlighted the exceptions,
Yeah, I'm
highlight your own
there.
exceptions and explain them, please.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, happy to do that.
Okay.
And I will say, I mean, if the appetite of the board is to pull some of these back or not do this big of a fee increase on some of these this year, I'm fine with that. What I'm bringing to you forward is my best assessment, and, this can all be adjusted.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, if there's concerns, and, the other thing, if we get to the meeting and, there's concerns about planning, we're not hearing them about building and sanitation, we can switch those levers on that program for our fees anytime. So maybe
But
if you want me to
doesn't
come back and do
require the
work on planning,
state part.
I can do that, right? I mean, but we've done our work with our noticing. So if maybe August 1st, we move forward with building and sanitation, or there's some concerns,
Why
it's
don't-
our schedule this
Why
time.
don't you bring forward your explanation and
Yep.
then we can make our decision based on that space. I
Okay.
think that we do want to try to get to a place where we feel that the fees are accurately covering as much of the expense as the
Yep.
market will bear. I mean,
Yeah.
that is really what we've heard from our auditors about our option for raising revenue as a county. is that one of the key pieces of this is that we can charge fees to cover the costs of what we're doing. There is a factor of what the market will bear, and I think that's the piece that I'm hearing my fellow commissioners just have some concern about, is have we reached something beyond what the market will bear in terms of people actually moving forward with their development, et cetera. But I think we have to start with, what does it cost us to
Yeah.
do this work? And again, I think in this department, in the interest of, I mean, I've talked with Sarah at length many times about the concern that when we have a financial downturn and general funds get cut, her department gets cut, and then that impacts our builders, our developers, and our economy in a way that we don't want it to, in terms of the county leading the economy into a down space that maybe it doesn't need to in building,
Right.
but the inability for us to staff the department is the problem, which is, I think, where many of these incremental steps have come in planning to try to mirror what we've seen in building codes, which is it pays for itself.
Right.
So I think that's been kind of the underlying, at least in my 4 years of working, or 3 years of working with Sarah, the underlying intent has been to try to move this forward to as much self-sustaining as we can,
As we can.
so that we can sustain it in both good times and bad for this industry.
Yeah.
So I think we're clear. We're asking you to bring forward a little bit more justification on the large jumps. And then we will take a look at those and have whatever conversation is needed. But really, at the heart of it is, we are looking at this as a level set
Yeah.
that we wouldn't expect to see as much change in the future.
Yep. Yeah, that works. Yeah, work for you. Work for you. Okay, so we'll be back late July. I'll
Fine.
work with Debbie on
Yep.
board order scheduling, and I will bring Chris and Chris back with me on that Wednesday for that discussion.
Okay.
And we'll see you then.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
thank
You too, welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good to have you.
Okay, commissioners, that was the end of our topic list for today. Are there commissioner updates? And we will not all be together again until the 23rd of July, if I'm not mistaken, because we are not meeting on the 2nd. I am gone on the 9th. Commissioner Bell, you were gone on the 16th. Commissioner Fournier, you around?
Well, I'm not around, well,
Back on the 23rd?
yeah, I'm around. This week, next week, I might be around because I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah,
Okay.
so we won't see each other for a while.
We
Okay.
will not. Are there any updates with that in mind, other than what our schedules are and when we might expect to be able to reach each other?
I just want to throw out for us to start thinking about how Dan and the Parks Department have asked me, how are we handling the TLT reimbursement? So if that's what we're even calling it, how are we handling it? Because we have in this budget, we've included TLT funds from Parks to go to the general fund, and Parks wants to know, they have, bills coming in from things they're doing. There's a water system project and the front entrance project, et cetera. So they want to know, well, how are we doing that? Is it a one-to-one replacement? Should we just be submitting our bills? And I said, we don't have a plan yet. We don't have a system yet that we've agreed on, like this is the how-to, and we'll come up with one. We just haven't done it yet. So I think we need to have that conversation so that they'll know, like, are they just submitting bills for, and I'm not.
On the 28th is what I think Rachel was
Maybe
talking
part of
about.
that.
That's part of that.
Yeah, and I would.
How are we doing that and
Yeah.
going forward? I think that's planned for because I asked her the same question that
Yeah, it's on, I know it's on her list. I
it's
don't
on
know
her
if it'll be
list
the
for
28th.
for our big financial discussion meeting. That's when that's gonna happen.
Okay,
What I would say is, until after July 1, none of it matters.
right, correct.
And I would suggest that at this point, it may very well be a transfer that occurs at the end of the year, where we simply
Yeah.
make a transfer of our transient lodging tax into a revenue category for them, and that we make a transfer of funding from them back to us, which would allow them to do business as usual for them, it would be totally the same totally, it wouldn't require special bills, special billing, et cetera. It would just be a transfer of revenue. That's my first off guess of the easiest
That was
thing.
my understanding how it was going to be, that it was not going to affect any changes of business as usual.
Which would be fine, but we just never said. We never told them, so of course they
Well,
want to know.
and we don't know because we also have a decision, and I will go ahead and say this because we don't have Orla on the phone. But we have a decision to make of how exactly we wish to characterize this. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first time that a county will be taking transient lodging tax revenue, utilizing it to operate a department, and taking that other money.
I would say,
back.
I would say and I would be careful. I think
Well-
it's used to fund projects that are tourism related.
And I think that's one of the questions we have not resolved for ourselves, and I'm gonna use as an example, the Pioneer Museum. The
Well, yeah.
Pioneer Museum receives money every year, which operates a
operation.
tourism-related facility, which is the museum.
Same with the fair.
Right.
Same with the fair, and I think there is an opportunity to decide whether we are saying we are operating a tourism-related facility, which is parks, and it is just a straight over transfer and a straight transfer back, or if we're saying it is specifically for projects. Because one of the things to recognize is we have currently $1 million that we are expecting to provide to parks in return for $1 million back from parks. They do not necessarily have $1 million worth of projects planned this year or
Sure.
every year, or how that's done. So there is a conversation, and at the end of the day, this is going to be, if I understand it correctly, basically a risk conversation that we are or a risk decision that we're
Sure.
making about how we describe the money, to both of your points of whether it is facilities or whether it is operating a facility. And part of the question for parks is, do they have $1 million a year of tourism facility improvements that would allow us to truly say, yes, it's going to a tourism facility improvement?
Or is it just like the fair?
Or
the-
is it like the fair
which
and the
is an
Pioneer
easy way,
Museum, which
probably.
is operating a tourism facility? And I think that will also drive how we say it, how we do it, all
I
of
think
that.
that's part of that big financial meeting question.
Part of
Right.
that big question.
Yeah.
But yeah, because my sense was they didn't have $1 million worth of facility projects every year that we could say this is specifically for, that we could swap for.
They could, because, but it depends on how much we want to invest in development. So if we're gonna develop the upper part of
Sure.
Kilchis, if we're going to develop, the, new Webb Park, certainly that's gonna be well over $1 million. But this year, depends, it depends on how much we put into Neatart's boat launch. So we could potentially, but also I think all of parks is a tourist facility. So the whole thing and everything
And
that happens in it is a tourist
One
facility.
thing that
And-
came
and I
up,
think that's key because when we talk about developing Webb Park or the upper loop of Kilchis, we're talking about something that would not be able to be done with the revenue they bring in a regular year. They would still need all of their revenue to run their regular facilities, and this would be in addition to, which means we would then be giving them TLT for that, and we would be going to the reserve pool of money they have accumulated over the years and be taking out of the reserve pool in replacement for facility development, and they would keep all of their collected fees to run their regular operations. That's, I think, the part we haven't sussed out, and I think some of that's gonna depend on Parks plan for usage of revenue, which of those ways we might be looking at it.
and something that came up was a question, was parking kiosk tickets. His concern was he didn't budget for that. And Rachel, the idea was to buy those with TLT, but it's not the same, this transfer, it's not part of that. It's just like the lights at the tennis court or something like that, where it's another thing that needs to be discussed during that meeting. Because we just need to make the roadmap.
Yeah, and I think it's a risk decision in part of the roadmap because of whether or not there is any concern from the tourism community as to
Yeah.
what we're doing. We can absolutely see there's nothing wrong with this. It is a tourism facility. We're gonna give money to operate it and or money to ultimately develop further, but there has to be money to swap
Mhm.
back the other direction. And the question is which money gets swapped
Yeah,
back? Because if you do the reserve, you have, I think there's about 3.5 or 4 million there.
Mhm.
You have 4 years worth of opportunity to do that at $1 million, and then they have nothing left
right.
to exchange, so to speak. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so it's an interesting
Right,
piece. But yeah, I think part of it's also a risk assessment.
right. Well, yes, and everything's a risk assessment, of course, but it doesn't strike me as a greater risk than what we're already doing with fairgrounds or
That's exactly the
or
same.
the museum.
It doesn't meet either, other than the visibility, because I think Orla or other tourism-related folks may be looking more closely at us because of the stir that is been created by all of us for good reason.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll tell them, just hang on. We'll be talking about it late in July, but specifically, the invoices that they have right now, they're holding right now for their water system. Should they just pay them as usual?
I would just pay everything as usual. I really think that rather than creating the complicated system of here's this bill, send it to treasury to be paid differently, I think it's very likely to be just a cash swap
Okay,
on the books, most likely.
I would agree. I think this is I think it's overcomplicated. I think the risk I understand, but the complication is being added. I think it's the risk that you're worried about is a valid concern, perhaps. But I don't think, they've been asking, and no, this isn't going to affect you.
they're just in a vacuum of information.
Yeah.
They just
Yeah.
don't know what we're doing.
I would tell them just please
Business as usual.
keep operating as usual, and the expectation is that there will be a transfer made into their revenue pool of transient lodging, just like we do with the others. And the difference is there would be a transfer made out of their revenue pool later in the year when they had amassed $1 million that would come back into the general fund.
You know, since we're having this conversation, the other thing that could be discussed is if it has to be a certain way is that revenue coming back could be rent. It could be, it's county property. Like there's a lot of things we haven't discussed that we were gonna discuss because it's a whole new concept. But none of it involved any kind of, that I've ever heard of any kind of, and you're right, they didn't know, any kind of, complicated invoicing or anything else. They just do the money. We're gonna figure out if this is even possible and then the mechanism for doing it.
Yeah, I think they do business as usual. And it would also, it's starting July 1 anyway.
Yeah,
So anything
right.
they have currently, they need
Right.
to take care of currently. But yeah, I am just, and I'm thinking about that because I'm thinking about, for example, how roads get transient lodging, right? It's just a transfer that happens
Mhm.
financially. Roads doesn't submit any special invoices for transient lodging. It's just that a transfer is made in the finance system into their revenues, showing that they have this transient lodging money to use. Similarly, there's a small amount that goes to Sarah's department to run the deal. It's all just a
Yeah.
Sean transfer. That's all it is. And I would expect the return would be the same. It's just gonna be a Sean transfer.
And I guess the other thing that's a concern is we've done this a lot. We've done you just did it with the pool. You've done it with the YMCA, with the bowling alley. We've done other smaller projects, other parks. The point is, we are creative in our use of restricted funds, but we are not building an annex with that money. We're not building, I think this nervousness is because of the aggressiveness that they've had recently. But we've been doing this. You guys have already been doing this as a creative and good use of that fund. You're using it for a facility that is 98% tourist.
Yeah,
And operates boat ramps that are used by tourists and has parking lots and toilets that are used by tourists.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're sketched out because of a lot of things, but I think we're overthinking it is what concerns me. And I don't feel as nervous about it because I can say with a straight face that everything that money And all we're doing is we have a department and we're doing revenue sharing with the department because we are the owner operator of that department. And it's one department that can create revenue. And all we're saying is we need some of that revenue because we've lost timber revenue and we need to do some revenue sharing. And we have this restricted money that we're gonna use for restricted projects. And we're not giving it to the sheriff's office, which we could have done if the law passed in Salem, but we can't. Like none of this discussion would have mattered because it would have all been unrestricted. Most of it would have been unrestricted. So I think, I understand the hesitancy, but when you look at the examples that we've already been doing for 10 years, this is the same thing, except the component is now we're saying, hey, parks, you need some of that revenue that you're creating because these campgrounds are so successful and they are bringing in revenue and you have some reserves. We want you to continue to thrive and continue to make reserves, and we're going to invest that restricted money to build more amenities and more campgrounds. And so I just feel like it's
Well, and I think that, but that's where we just have to have the clarity in how we see it.
yes,
Because we are not just investing in building more campgrounds. We're investing in and operating the facilities that we have today. And,
right. But that's,
So-
let's just pretend, okay, so let's just pretend we're not going to use TLT to invest in those facilities. It would be irresponsible for us to not look at possibly doing revenue sharing and moving some of that money back. So that's the component to me that you can leave the TLT out of it. And we have one department that is able to create revenue that can help the whole. We just have the ability, which is unusual because counties that don't have it. We have the ability to not hurt that department because we can use this other fund to do the job that they're doing.
Yeah, and I think the key is just the determination that we're making, is this a backfill of revenue so they run the campgrounds? Or are we specifically investing in physical facility? And to me, that's the question that I don't know that everyone is on the same page about in this process, and that we need to make sure we are.
Agreed.
Because I hear us say it both ways, and I think it's just important that we're clear which way we're all agreeing on it. So that if we're agreeing it is for facility development, which is fine, is there $1 million worth of facility development that is not an add-on that requires more money? So that
It does
right?
make sense. I think we do it
I
to
think
figure out
we
how to
should.
say, I think both ways are fine. I
I
think
don't disagree. We just
Yeah.
have to agree to which
which one we're using.
we're using,
I agree
and
with
then that goes into whatever the board order or whatever the
Exactly, yes.
resolution, whatever the thing is that codifies the thing.
Yeah.
The thing that codifies the thing.
No,
Yeah, if
absolutely.
we
Like
drop
what we're
the
using
word,
I think it's fine
Yeah.
both ways, but we should be saying one thing.
yeah,
should be
if we
saying one
drop
thing.
the word development, it's gonna be a lot less confusing.
Yes, and I
Mhm.
think that's,
Yeah.
that's for me, probably the key is we are just,
Mhm.
Yes.
we're utilizing transient lodging funds to operate our parks department. They may use it ultimately to build something, they may use it just to run, it's
Yes.
up to them,
Agreed.
right? But in return, $1 million of what they generate, which is generated revenues coming to the general fund.
Yes, some kind of revenue sharing thing, but
Does that help?
It does, yeah.
Thank you, because
Yeah.
it's been a conversation I've had with Sean and I've had with Rachel.
yeah, we
We've been
haven't had.
trying to
we
figure
haven't
out
had
like,
have this.
what are we calling it? How are we? Because you're making it up
That's
as
the
we go
same thing.
along.
I've been doing the same thing, like we have to, we need to figure it out, so we'll get there, we'll get it
Yep.
soon.
Yeah.
But they're fine.
They're fine. Business as usual. The money will just show up in the bank. There we
Yes.
go.
Check is in the mail.
The check is in the mail. Exactly. Okay. Thank you. Good conversation. Anything else, since we will not be back together
Not for
until,
me. No, I hope
later
y'all
in
have a good
July.
holiday. I'm going to
Big
Canada.
holiday.
I'm going
I'll
to
send you a
Canada.
graduation picture of my
Yeah.
big county college graduation,
yeah, woohoo,
cap and gown.
right? And then where are you off to on your vacation? You started. to tell
Vancouver,
me this
BC.
morning. Vancouver, BC.
I just came from BC.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
So,
Yeah, it's a great city.
yeah, we'll look for, what is it, Timmy's Coffee? Timothy's?
Timmy's, no, Tim
Timothy.
Horton, Tim Horton.
Tim Horton. So it's funny, one of my
Canadian
friends is in Canada somewhere, and he posted a Facebook picture today of Tim Horton coffee, and I was like, well, now I know what that is. It's like a thing. So, yeah, so
Really
find
good.
some Tim Horton
Yeah.
coffee. Apparently that's the thing.
June Dairy Parade.
Mhm.
I'm driving the Grand Marshal
I am so
Kalen
glad that
in
you-
my
Good for
Mustang.
you.
Oh,
That's fun.
good, I'm glad because I
Did you
won't,
offer up your
I won't be back. I'll be at County College. I'm
offer
gonna
up your
miss,
stinky Camaro?
I could do my stinky Camaro.
All right,
I'm glad you're gonna be representing us. Do us
Mr.
proud.
Bell's writing
Yeah,
on the.
with
on the
Cheryl
Dems.
Davy, I think, yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah, and who's Grand Marshal this year?
Kaylin.
Oh, fun.
So it'll be
Oh,
Kaylin and
good.
KJ.
Oh,
Oh,
good,
wow.
that's fun.
Why are we celebrating him? He's leaving us.
He's already left,
He's already left us.
That's
but-
what I mean. Why is he back? It makes me mad.
but he didn't sell his house, so.
No, they say they're gonna keep coming back, so we'll see.
Great.
We'll see. So,
That's a,
yeah,
that's a good choice.
yeah,
that'll be
great
fun.
it'll be. Okay. Okay.
4th of July,
Fourth of July.
Story days
where it is, right?
coming up next.
Gonna miss
It's the
that.
18th, right?
Yeah,
19th.
I'm gonna try to be here.
Oh,
I was gonna
Clover-
be on top of it. I'm gonna be
Yeah,
here.
Clover's Day is the 5th.
Okay.
There's the July 4 parades, but then Clover's Day the next day.
And then Fourth of July doesn't, what does Rockaway have? They have,
Two things. They have the parade at 10, I think, and then they have the Wiener Dog races at 1. And then the Manzanita parade, I think, is also at noon or 1. So some people go from Rockaway to Manzanita, so
Or
they
if you-
double up on their parade.
you know that
Park
there's
on
an
the north
Oceanside
end.
one too. Did you know that?
No,
Yeah,
No.
it's very short,
that's fun.
but it's very exuberant. People are very excited about it. There are
Exuberant.
floats,
That's a good word.
and I try to go to that too, but again, I think,
Take your flute.
yeah, take my Camaro on that one.
Good idea.
All right.
Okay,
All
well,
right.
thank you. We will adjourn this board briefing at 4:13 PM.
Yeah, there's so much going